This is our end of the year all hands on deck meeting, December 8th, 2017. And we'd like to stand and have a moment of silence, and then Mr. Fielding, could you lead us in the pledge? Thank you.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. Do we have any add-on appointments requests?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Add-on appointments, I am going to be appointing Mayor Doug Gibson of Oak Hill to the Citizen Advisory Committee, not the Citizen,
The Management Board.
to the Management Board, excuse me, under Volusia League of Cities category.
Excellent.
And Mr. Gibson is here. Can I take a point of personal
Absolutely.
privilege? Mayor Gibson, will you please stand and be recognized?
Thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we need a motion for that?
We'll move that to new business, I think.
Okay.
And handle it under new business.
Okay.
It'll be cleaner than trying to pull consent out, and we'll do it separately.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Okay, moving into public comment. Before I call for public comment, I would like to recognize a special guest. Ms. Blair Engelbrecht has been working as an intern for Port Canaveral and was loaned to us by Bob Musser for several weeks to assist staff. She just finished her master's degree in international relations with an environmental policy emphasis at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. While she seeks employment, she will continue to assist the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program staff as a volunteer. So on behalf of the Indian River Council Board, congratulations and thank you. Okay, so let's move into public comment. Do I have any cards? Robert Steffen?
Thank you. It's Stephen.
Stephen, okay, sorry.
I'm a Scot. I talked with you guys a while ago, before I went back to New Hampshire, at the recommendation of my lung doctor, that she said I should be in the mountains of New Hampshire. Well, it got too cold and the wood stove sent me back here, so here I am again. I'll be quick with it. Since I last saw you, I filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division for violation of the American Disabilities Act on the city of Sebastian for spraying in front of my house, spraying either diquat or glyphosate or whatever they're spraying. They won't give me the MSDS sheets on it to tell me exactly what they're spraying. But the response from the Department of Justice was they have no jurisdiction on that and they couldn't do anything about it. The good news is, I suppose, the city of Sebastian school systems are growing grass and other things in the school. The bad news is the city is still spraying to kill that stuff. So I don't know what the answer is. And we don't know whether they're spraying some sort of Agent Orange or whatever they're spraying. But, I'm sorry. No, I can't find that out. I'd like to ask if you can please make a move to try to get someone in your organization to try and do something about this ludicrous behavior that's happening, because we're all scrambling to go good, and yet there's still really bad happening. and it would be easy enough to stop this. We've got alternative ways of dealing with it. We've offered the alternative ways. I've got 3 or 4 organizations behind me that would like to help take care of the waterway, the flow of the waterway, but the city still refuses. So I don't know how long I'm going to stay here. My doctor insists that I move out of here because of what's happening. It happened yesterday too. They sprayed again yesterday. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But thank you for all you do. I appreciate you being here. So we got to do something. Thanks.
Thank you. Moving to committee reports. Dr. Jacoby?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
We weren't sure if Bob was going to be here, but Bob Yulovich is in the room. And and I knew he was going to want the mic.
Come on, don't make me out to be the bad guy.
Start the clock at 3 minutes.
Good morning to you. Here. Oh my gosh. There's a saying that a great speaker knows to have a dynamic beginning and an ultra dynamic ending, and to keep the 2 parts as close as possible. Sure. You're right. So I am. Oh, by the way, new member, there's an initiation, so we'll handle that one next meeting. The management board. Bring your wallet. Okay. I stand here in December of this year, just still humbled and still in awe of where we come from and where we're at. And I just am just honored to continue to be the chair of the management board and be surrounded by so much intelligence and professionalism. And I am humbled by that. So Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, and God bless everyone. Thank you.
Same to you. Now we'll have Dr. Jacoby. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Chuck Jacoby from the St. Johns River Water Management District and the chair of the STEM Advisory Committee. So we had our meeting on the 28th to replace the meeting that was blown out by the hurricane in September. At this meeting, we talked a bit about the CCMP revision, and people are bringing their thoughts together on input for that. We also talked about coming up with an idea of what the science might help do for the lagoon and the restoration efforts over the next few decades. And so again, we'll be collecting people's input on the questions that they feel are the most important as we go forward. We also briefly mentioned the Flushing pilot project that was discussed at the last council meeting. And we'll be taking a look at what we could do to learn the most from something like a pilot project as we go forward. So the STEM AC will be considering what kinds of questions could you try to answer and how would you go about doing that. But we spent most of our time listening to a presentation about the refinement of the total maximum daily load, which is a group effort from a bunch of stakeholders, kind of spearheaded by Brevard County. And the STEM AC listened and was looking to make sure that we understood the science as far as the choice of whether the TMDL gets revised or not. Well, that's a regulatory decision. That's not in our bailiwick. And I think generally people came away feeling like the science was solid and that there had been a considerable amount of effort put into trying to come up with a refinement. So that's it.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the board? Mr. Fielding?
Please, this is not a criticism, Chuck, and you and I have talked about this before, but to me, TMDLs just allow polluters to continue to pollute. And if we want to restore the lagoon, that's not the way to do it. I don't care if the state thinks it is or not. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is for us to gradually figure out how can we eliminate these contaminants that are entering the waterway. Not how can we tolerate them, but how can we eliminate them. And it's a political issue, and I'm fairly familiar with political issues, and a lot of folks can go after your scalp on these kinds of things. So, but that's, and as I say, I'm not, you and I are not at loggerheads about this, but I do think it's important for us to at least give thought to how are we going to approach the contamination of our waterways. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the hard work you do. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Thank you, Dr. Jacoby. Jim Moore?
Good morning. Thank you, committee. I'm representing the Citizens Advisory Committee this morning. The Citizens Advisory Committee has had several good meetings this year. We are particularly excited about the small grants program, and we will be introducing that this 2018. There are grants between $500 and $5,000 that will be available to the citizens after a review and a scoring process. We're also excited about the Listening to the Lagoon project that will be supporting the CCMP as it comes forward. We're looking at scheduling meetings in each of the counties so that we can listen to the public and find out what their perspective on the health of the lagoon is and what we think that or what we hear them saying we should be doing about it. I want to thank you all and compliment you all on a fine job this year. Your report is excellent, and I'm looking forward to a progressive next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the board? Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 5, water quality and post-Hurricane Irma assessments. Dr. Jacoby.
Thank you. So we made it through the summer, which had a lot of people concerned given the result of 2016. It was a series of patchy blooms of some of the things that we'd seen, the phytoplankton that were blooming, the single cell algae, were some of the ones that typically bloomed in the past in the northern part of the Indian River Lagoon. So it's pyridinium, which people enjoy because of the bioluminescence, a diatom that has bloomed in the past as well, Pseudonetia. We did still see brown tide in some places, but it typically didn't dominate the way it had done in 2016. And pretty much it's the same situation now. There's still some patches of blooms around, but they haven't yet coalesced in any shape or form. And conditions are, in a sense, improving, so the blooms should ramp down. Water temperatures dropped pretty considerably with Irma passing through and the storms afterwards. Salinity, so water temperatures came down from the 90s into the mid 70s, so that helps. Salinities also came down. They were up in the 30s, and they're now down more in the upper teens and in the mid 20s. Dissolved oxygen has been good at most of the stations that survived Hurricane Irma. We did lose 3 during the hurricane. But the continuous monitoring stations show that dissolved oxygen levels are well above 2, 6 to 8 milligrams per liter, 2 being the sort of threshold where aquatic life starts to stress. Secchi depths, generally speaking, are well over a foot. Mosquito lagoons is from 1 to 3 feet. Banana River Lagoon is a little bit less than a foot, so Banana River Lagoon is still a little problematic as an area. And the IRL is typically 3 feet or more. So that's good for secchi depths. When in the past, when we had major blooms, you're looking at half a foot maybe, if you're lucky. There have been no fish kills this past month, and it looks as if water levels are coming down a little bit from what they had been. So conditions are moving.
So in other words, we're going into the winter in pretty good shape compared to last year.
Yeah, we had this summer was a little bit like the summer of 2014 or so, where you had patchy blooms, but nothing that turned into a large bloom that caused fish kills and things like that. There were localized fish kills, particularly in the canals and things, but you would have that in some of the summers anyway.
Good. Thank you, sir. Any questions from the board?
Yes, I have one. Yes, on your salinity level monitoring, how many station points do you collect from, and what's the frequency?
So the continuous monitoring, right now there are 3 that are operational.
Okay.
And they collect every hour.
Okay.
So.
And roughly where are those geographically?
So one's in Mosquito Lagoon, the southern part of Mosquito Lagoon, that's still operational. One in Banana River Lagoon.
Okay.
And one down by State Route 60.
Okay. Great, thank
are the
you.
ones that are working.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir. Didn't even have to ask. Thank you, Deb.
Hi, good morning. Just pull this up. Good morning, Deborah Drum, Martin County Ecosystem Manager. Pleasure to be here today to give you a little bit of an update on what's happening in the southern end of the system. Our current conditions, as of midnight last night, Lake Okeechobee is at 15.83 feet. So the last time I was here presenting, I gave you a more detailed overview of what some of the post-Hurricane Irma effects were and what are those conditions. So it's dramatically different than where we were a couple months ago. So the high, last time I stood before you, the lake was at 17.2 feet. So you can see it's dramatically reduced. Just a kind of a timeline of how things have played out post-Hurricane Irma. On September 15th, the Army Corps of Engineers did commence the maximum practicable releases. And the last time I stood before you, that's where we were. And on November 17th, those flows were reduced to 2,800 CFS. On December 1st, the flows were reduced to 1,800 CFS. We had been asking for that on our periodic scientist call with the Corps. And on December 8th, as of this morning, right as you were probably on your way to this meeting, they initiated further reduced flows to 1170 CFS. So this is a great improvement for the estuary. This is what we've been advocating for. The key word right now with the conditions is that we're in a major transition with conditions, and I'll demonstrate how we are what the transition is. As you can see, since that, like I said, November 17th, the flows were reduced to 2,800 CFS, so we've seen this couple weeks of reduction. But with the salinities, these are bottom salinities, you can see since that period of time, we've seen sort of this very slight increase in salinities as time has gone on. So this is where we were sitting yesterday. You can see these dips. We've had a lot of rainfall in Martin County, in the C-44 basin in particular, which I'll illustrate. But we have seen this slight improvement, but what we aren't seeing is our salinities are still in the poor condition for oysters. We're still in that red zone of where we would prefer to see salinities. So even with the reductions that we've had over the last couple weeks, we're still not where we need to be. We're not seeing the improvement in the salinities. And so we're hoping with this new 1170 CFS that we'll start to see that improvement and start getting up with some restoration of the oyster community. But we're not there yet. That's why we're in a transition. So we need to let these lower flows happen and then see where we're at. Just to give you an idea of temperatures, you can see we've just kind of been pretty stable with temperatures ranging from 23 to 24.5 degrees Celsius or 73 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, sort of in the estuary. The cold fronts come through. I expect they'll go down this weekend if the weather forecast holds. Just to give you an idea of what the temperatures are. But this is why we have also been kind of a strange transition for the St. Lucie. The graph on the left is from November 2nd through December 6th. And what you can see is where most of the system within the 16-county area of the Water Management District had been drying out, with rainfall about 30 to 60% or less than 30%. In Martin County, it was still 120 to 150% of average rainfall. And so we were just getting some of those anomaly rainfall events. So the C-44 basin was pretty full, and it was flowing a lot of water into the estuary as a result. So we just kind of had a weird month, not typical of some of the other counties. And then if you just look at what we have for December, you can see that system-wide, we're starting to see some of those drying trends. But even so, Martin and St. Lucie, even though we're 30 to 60%, we're a little bit wetter than a lot of the other areas of the Water Management District. So with those drier conditions, that's what has allowed, we've been getting recessions on the lake of about 1/4 of a foot in a week, which is a lot for the lake. And so there are some concerns about moving forward what water supply needs are going to be if the conditions get drier. Are we letting too much water out of the lake? And so the Corps is trying to balance all of those things. And so that's why we're in a transition. As these conditions start to get from this really wet condition to a drier condition, we always have some of the crystal ball decisions that have to be made on Water Management District, and as we know, we don't have a very accurate one, so it can be challenging with some of those discussions. The other thing that's weighing in is this is the 1-month precipitation probability outlook. And if you look for our region, that white region means that there's equal chances that we'll have above average or below average rainfall. It means we really don't know. You're flipping a coin. But in the 3-month, and this is kind of held for a while, the 3-month precipitation outlook is that we're going to have drier than normal conditions in our region. And that's also kind of part of the decision-making process of whether to release water from the lake to the estuaries or not. And so with these drier conditions, this is what has people sort of saying, be careful that you're not letting too much water out of the lake, because we want to make sure we don't get ourselves into a situation where we're going to have some kind of water shortage needs or that kind of thing. So again, key word for where we're at right now is transition. This is just to bring it a little bit more visual. This is, so you know, up until hopefully what we're entering into, but up until this time, we've been still getting a lot of this really dark water. This is at the Martin County, Palm Beach County line just on December 4th. So the water is still, it has a tendency to go down the south end in a longshore current, but you can see the conditions aren't looking great. We're just not seeing the improved conditions. And the oysters are telling us the same thing. The staff at the Water Management District haven't even really been able to get into the water or the Fish and Wildlife Commission because of the water conditions. It's just not safe to enter into the water right now. So they did do this by filling 5-gallon buckets 3 times, and they counted the live and dead oysters at the monitoring station, and essentially we have 0 live oysters at this point in time. So until those salinities get restored, this is the condition that we're looking at. We've got, and then I just wanted to point out the mean salinity increased to 0.92 ppt in November from 0.23. That's just not enough salinity to support the oysters for them to start recovering. So that's why we keep advocating for the lower flows, and we're hoping that we'll, with the 1170, finally start to see that. And you might ask, why would we ask for any water? Why would there be any water that we would be okay with from Lake Okeechobee? And that's because we're looking at the projection of going into the wet season already in the June timeframe. And if you don't, we need a lot of time to get water out of the lake. And if you don't get that recession of the lake and you start the wet season too high, if the lake level is too high, then you've set yourself up for a whole disaster of wet season discharges from Lake Okeechobee. And in the past, what that tells us is when you have that combination, you really are setting yourself up for blue-green algae blooms. And so that's why we're saying, don't cut us off now. We are okay with taking some lake water right now because we need that lake level to get to a safe place going into the wet season, so we're protecting ourselves next summer. And this is what the water looks like right now. I mean, this is what our oyster stations are looking like. I don't know anybody who would want to get in that water, so can't really, you can see kind of what we're dealing with. And we're hoping that the reduced flows will start to see clearer water, bluer water, get some water clarity back into the system. And just to close, again, this is the Stewart this is the sandbar where a lot of people recreate over the weekend. This isn't very many boats actually for this area. Typically it's a lot more than that. But you can see the water is really brown, it's really dark. These are diehards and they're probably not swimming too much, but they're probably just hanging out on their boats. So anyway, I just wanted to make it a little bit visual. We're not seeing the improvement yet, but we are hopeful. Just where we stand right now, we're in a big transition and we're hoping to see some improvements as it would be a great holiday present for us if we could start to get some clean water back. So with that, I just wish you all a happy holiday and thank you.
I'm somewhat amazed at the comments you've made about balancing the water and whether you're retaining it in the lake or releasing it in the lake, and you've got to forecast this out 5 or 6 months and hope your crystal ball tells you or the weather forecasters tell you or give you somewhat accurate information. It's a real juggling act, and I had no idea it was, I just thought it was, well, the lake's a little high, we better let some out today. And that's not the case, obviously.
Oh, no, and I think I'm glad that you said that, because that's a really important point for people throughout the Indian River Lagoon system to understand, is that it isn't an immediate decision-making process where you're like, oh, we have too much, let's do something about it. people agonize over the models, and there's some very complex models that go into the operational schedule that govern Lake Okeechobee. It really isn't an easy decision, not for the Corps, and not for the district, and not for us, not for anybody. And so you have a bunch of options, and you're just looking to do the least amount of damage as opposed to a restoration, and that's why we keep advocating so strongly for full implementation of the Indian River Lagoon South project, because that project is going to have tangible benefits to some of these freshwater flows that we see, not necessarily from the lake, but the basin flows. It's a complicated system, and you hear that. It's almost cliche to say, but this is just one example of how we're managing water now for what happens in June. And I'm looking at blue-green algae blooms as a real threat in my decision-making here in December. So.
All I can say is God bless you, because from most of the weather forecasts I see, they have trouble getting tomorrow's weather right.
Yep.
So when
I
they're
will happily
forecasting
accept your
5 or 6
blessings.
months. So God bless you. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Zadowski?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to add in that, for the efforts and the challenges that face Martin County because of the Lake O discharges, I, as a county commissioner in St. Lucie County, have to take responsibility for not being able to move forward the C23, C24 reservoirs, which dumps directly into your estuary. I will continue to fight and try to find the revenue necessary, the land necessary to secure and to clean the water on the C23, C24. We are moving forward in Port St. Lucie with the McCarty Ranch project, but knowing how our basin also contributes to the destruction of the St. Lucie estuary, I will continue to fight as hard as I can and ask for this group's support, as well as the state agencies, to find the revenue necessary to create those reservoirs. St. Lucie County has set aside $1 million still, waiting for the opportunity to secure the appropriate land and to begin the process of the engineering to create those reservoirs. It's our responsibility. We are doing it. We are participants in the destruction, and I apologize for that, but we will continue to fight and try and find ways to make it better.
And I would like to make mention that Mr. Zadowski, he's, although he's got the Hollywood good looks, the reason the glasses are on is because he had some eye surgery yesterday.
I'm not trying to be cool. It doesn't work for me.
Mr. Fielding, you have the floor.
Thank you. You're doing excellent, continually excellent in what you're doing. And Chris, thanks. Yeah, you guys are messing up, but we appreciate your efforts to try to help. You know I'm teasing.
We're trying to.
You know I'm teasing. So yes, they're making every effort, and we appreciate those strong efforts. I think 2 or 3 things. There is an Army Corps LOW committee, which is the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Committee, which has been, I don't know, it seems like it's been about a year. Maybe it's
Maybe a little longer. I'm not sure. The project delivery team associated with the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Project.
It seems like it's been a long time. But anyhow, what the hopefully the outcome of that will be a realization that we do need more retention, detention, diversion, reservoir north of the lake. Once it gets in the lake, here's a basic concept. To me, this is a basic concept, and Chris, if you differ, tell me. But the basic concept, once that water gets into the lake, there are only 2 places it's really going to go. It's going to go to Fort Myers, which is through the Caloosahatchee, and it's going to go to us, which is through the St. Lucie. All the other, because probably it's been raining to the south, probably. I mean, that's a standard pattern over the years. So there's really not any outlet that's effective going south, not any volume of that, and some of y'all may see that very differently. So there's not any volume of outlet going south. It's going to go to us. To prevent this from being generational, we need to figure out how to increase the ability to divert, to hold, to store, whatever terms we want to use, so that all of this water doesn't come rushing into Lake Okeechobee. And some of it is, let's protect wetlands up in Orange and Volusia and Osceola, let's protect wetlands up there so that it doesn't come down as readily. So there are a lot of things that seem that we can move forward. To me, reservoirs are a potential because reservoirs would allow us to address flow. The current LO committee is focusing more on wells, the aquifer storage and recovery wells, which, you know, that's okay, but that's a dry time solution, candidly, because it doesn't, if the water is coming at 8,000 CFS, 10,000 CFS, whatever is coming, you're not going to have time to put the water in the well. That well only takes maybe 5 million gallons a day. That's about, and tell me when I'm totally wrong, but those ASR wells, that's my understanding, the capacity is about 5 million gallons a day. So you aren't going to be able to divert sufficient water, some, but not much. So that's really a place where you're going to move water and hold it so that if we come up to a dry time, then we have that available to bring back up. But it's not a solution for this massive flooding of water that comes into the lake. Water comes into the lake over 6 times faster than we can get it out. So as Ms. Drum was suggesting, that lake jumped up to over 17 feet. That was crucial because that dike is mud and vegetation. Now, Army Corps has built a retaining wall around the, Brandon probably knows precisely, but a retaining wall around the northeast sort of quarter. So that's protecting that area. But when you get into Pahokee, South Bay, Clewiston, Moorhaven, we don't have those kind of protections there. So there's a lot of complexity. But my concern is, candidly, is that we are allowing limitations of funds to be the main driver of decisions, not solution decisions, but decisions that we then make that are sort of halfway kind of. I'm not fussing at you guys, but I'm sort of am. But we're making decisions that are based on limitations of funds, not achieving solution. That's an area of problem that I really, because we will one day no longer be the #1 priority in the country. Somebody else will be. And so those monies and those efforts will then move somewhere else. And so if we waste this opportunity to focus this energy to solve this Lake Okeechobee problem, then it's not going to resurrect some 30 years from now. We will have lost our chance. That's how I see it. Okay, that's my politics for this. You're doing an outstanding job, and I appreciate it.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Bartlett?
So Commissioner Fielding hit it right on the head. Funding is critical here. And so the governor asked for $355 million for South Florida to deal with this issue specifically. That's the biggest ask ever in the nation, in the history of Everglades and South Florida. And that includes money for the dike. It includes money for all the reservoirs, Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, the dispersed water management projects, everything that gets right at the issue that Ms. Drum presented to us, because it's a tragic issue. You know, the state's been there. What we need to really get focused on is the federal advocacy to make sure the federal funding gets there. And this past year, they only got $77 million for Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. They need to be at least at $200 million. And we see the effects of that budget on their schedules. And you know, I've seen what they have to do, and they're delaying C-23, C-24. because of those kind of federal budgets. And so while the state's pushing like crazy, it's really up to us to advocate for the feds to be there with us while we're putting that kind of funds up, paying for their projects that the state's not responsible for. In fact, Herbert Hoover Dike, they need at least $200 million a year for Herbert Hoover Dike rehabilitation. So there's a big federal need in this situation. So I think it is incumbent upon us to make sure that that's known. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Tucker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to mirror Commissioner Zadowski's comments about C-2324. I mean, without question, as your governing board representative at South Florida Water Management District, I understand the importance of that project moving forward, and we need to be focused on that amongst all these other projects in our basket that we're working on. But that being one of the most impaired basins in our district, that project needs to be addressed, and we need to be doing all that we can do. So we support you in that effort. And Commissioner Fielding's absolutely correct. Northern Storage is huge. The Lake Okeechobee Watershed Project that I've been involved in every single public meeting since I came on the governing board in June. That's a 15,000 acre proposed reservoir up in the Glades County area that we're working very closely with the Seminole Tribe of Florida, who's affected by it next door, the community of Buckhead Ridge, and some other things that we're dealing with up there. But that's once again another vital project that we need to have to reduce those discharges. And then of course, staff's working unbelievably hard on the EAA reservoir through Senate Bill 10. I mean, I just can't imagine just the amount of work that our staff is putting in on top of all these other projects that we're working on. And then we're moving in this timeline that is very, very short, but I think the work that's being done is tremendous. And I think we're going to have some exciting news coming out in our meetings next week about how it's going to be of benefit to our estuaries, and also I'm very excited about that and seeing that move forward. Deb, I had a quick question, and thank you for your presentation and being somewhat new to all this now 6 months in, but when you were talking about the salinity levels and how and the oysters in the 0.92 that we had come to, and you said that was well short of where we need to be. What is that target number, if you will, in salinity where the oysters are in a healthy environment?
So we like to see the oysters, we like to see the salinities anywhere between 14 and 20 parts per thousand. And right now we're at, if you look at the graph here, even with the reduced flows, we don't know what's going to happen with the 1170. We're hoping that it improves, but we're still under 12 with the basin runoff plus the Lake Okeechobee discharges. So those salinities under 12 are just not going to do it for oyster recovery. So we need to see that. And then on a weekly basis, the ecological conditions are assessed by the Water Management District, and they have a nice chart that has the green space, I don't have it with me, I'm sorry today, but the kind of the green area, the yellow and the red, and it shows you where the salinity's been tracking, and that it's been red for, basically for a long time, since at least August, maybe before.
How long do you think it's going to take for that to recover?
If we get the flows right, usually once we get those salinities, it'll rebound pretty quickly. So you'll see this graph here, you'll see this actually trend even further upward into some good salinity ranges that we need for oysters to begin to recover. And you need the water clarity, right, too. And so we have to look at a couple of those different combined factors. And then, this is the big question about ecological resilience in the St. Lucie Estuary and the Indian River Lagoon, and one that I think that will be well documented in the CCMP update, which you'll hear about next, is how many harm events can a system take before the recovery gets harder and harder and harder, and to the point where have we reached a tipping point? Are we getting close to? And those are ecologically extremely difficult questions to answer. But it can take a couple years for the oysters to fully recover. But lately, we haven't even been able to recover because we've been getting major events every couple years that are affecting the oyster population. So the question is whether the combined effect of 10 years of every other year having really bad situation for oysters, where does that put us in the future? It's a great question, and one that if we had a whole lot more monitoring and a lot more funding to answer a lot of those questions, it would be great to be able to understand that. Right now, we're really focused on just trying to get the conditions restored to something that will give them a chance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zadowski?
This is all great conversation, and I'm proud to sit up here with so many agencies and elements of our local government agencies, but we need to recognize that we have a systemic issue. We're talking about after-the-fact challenges. When I say after-the-fact challenges, we're dealing with discharges and things that are coming off our lands and paying to clean them up after the fact. We as local governments have to begin to start to work from the systemic side of things and create the water storage cleansing cells upstream on land before they ever get to any of the water discharge areas, canals, and even the lagoon or our oceans. So, from the standpoint of government agencies, planning has to be part of the process. We continue to add hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people each year or each few years. And as development comes, we will continue to face these problems, and they will only exacerbate unless we take clear planning challenges today, increasing the amount of water that's held on any development site. We currently develop at 25-year, 3-day storms. We should be developing at 100-year storms, 500-year storms as part of the opportunity to remove storm water discharges from our systems. Because if we don't do it, we're going to continue to throw billions and billions and billions of dollars after the fact to fix something that could have been fixed prior to having the discharges. So that's my soapbox, and I'm going back over here. Thank you.
Well said.
Could I just take a half a second?
Mr. Fielding, you have the floor.
One of the original reasons that we came together as counties was to try to do things as counties, and I wonder, that's super, I wonder if maybe we would have a resolution, not this second, but have a resolution that would say to encourage each of the counties to deal with their planning so that it's in line to reflect our new awareness of these storm cycles, and that we then have encouraged the counties to consider the 500-year rather than the 20-year or
25-year, 3-day storms.
25-year. But that we start looking at what's really happening out in the existing change in this world, so that we as counties then start making rules that reflect this movement of our ecosystem, which is interpreted and reflected through the rain cycles. Is that good? Well, you probably have a better way to say what a motion would be than I, but I'm just saying that we have a resolution and ask staff and Ms. Antsy or whomever to come back to us, if that's acceptable by board, to ask that we would have a resolution that would be one of encouragement for the counties. Go ahead,
Chairman.
please.
I would simply say that I have already begun the discussion with our staffs and looking at a comprehensive master plan change because we are not doing it right. We just saw 22 inches of rain in 70 hours in St. Lucie County. We could have chosen every reservoir. We could have had a reservoir the size of Grand Canyon, and St. Lucie County would have flooded everywhere. I had a young lady in my office, what was it, Tuesday of last week, 97-year-old woman, lived in a community that is on one side of her house is 5 Mile Creek, the other side is 10 Mile Creek. Lives in a little island, and because of development along C20 of 25th Street, now this discharges are being moved into that C5. I'm sorry, the 5 Mile Creek and the 10 Mile Creek, and now her property is a severe repetitive loss area. They built in the 70s, and only until the 90s and early 2000s did she ever flood. And so, this is clear. She made it very clear. Development, hope you make money, but don't hurt us downstream. And it really struck a chord with me. And so my goal is, whether through this body, my own county's planning board, through our comprehensive plan, is to create the mechanisms in which we hold more water, never discharge, and even change some of the dynamics that we permit developments to use their roadways and driveways as part of the drainage system. because that begins to undermine and create problems and cost money. So until we go and we collectively create a systemic approach to the challenges, a long-term fix, we're going to continue to spend billions of dollars to try and fix, which we could have fixed prior to. So I'm supportive if this body were capable, and this is one of our attorneys' questions. Are we able to support such a letter and such a request or encouragement to our counties that are participant in this body? To encourage them to look at their planning options for removing water from the system.
If I might jump in first, I want to make a suggestion, and I think, our attorney can talk about a resolution, but the CCMP, the Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan, if done well, should be integrating that kind of specificity across the board: stormwater, wastewater, groundwater, emerging pollutants, including how we crosswalk back to your local comp plans. And so we are on a fast track to try to get a draft, within the next, 6 to 9 months. And in fact, the challenge of CCMPs is not in the delivery of the draft, it's in the deliberation among the stakeholders. And even though we're non-regulatory, this is going to be prescriptive, and you're going to see in a minute kind of the back end of this, the projects that are emerging. But I would suggest, as your executive director, that maybe you hold on that resolution, because we will be looking to every city or through the leagues, every county, and every partner to sign off on that CCMP. And to be honestly, if we don't address that very issue, that comp planning, the land use issue, then we'll have failed in this next 10-year directive of a CCMP. So that'd be my recommendation at the moment. Let's see how this all comes together as a connected directive, because if you change stormwater, it changes the groundwater impacts. All of this has got complicated connections.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with our director and commissioner. I think that's a very valuable approach to success.
Yes, concur.
I agree. Point well taken.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a suggestion. Staff have been talking about this a lot, and some of you have joined us when we have opportunities to take field trips. But as I go through the 5 counties, I have recognized more and more that how many of us in Brevard and Volusia County may never have actually stood on the dike, of Lake Okeechobee and seen the scale of the projects that we're talking about. And so what I'd like to suggest is, number one, we get a lot of invitations for ribbon cuttings, and a lot of times those invitations are kind of small group, and we'll work with our partners. So if DEP's got a ribbon cutting, we'll make sure, if they're okay, that everybody gets an invite, because it's always great to see a project near completion, and we've been to a few of those. And if we can schedule some opportunities for you all to see Mosquito Lagoon, see this middle section, all of the issues are the same, but the spatial and temporal scales are different. And Lake Okeechobee is a unique, what I would call, acute episodic event. And so, before we're through this year, I'd love to be able to say we've all seen it and you have a sense, because even after 40 years, I am still almost taken aback when I'm down in, the Everglades, looking at the amount of work that the Water Management District and the quality of the science on the most complicated plumbing project. I mean, I can't even keep up with that science. And so I'd like to suggest we try to get you all, on site this year as we can, so you can actually see it for real, because we're moving to this one lagoon perspective. And I can tell you from our time in Washington, D.C., the lagoon discussions and the Everglade discussions are beginning to come together within certain senators and House members. And this is nationwide, and we're going to have to fight for Florida's piece, because we have these problems throughout the nation. And if we can come up there with the unified Florida delegation, on water quality, that will serve us well.
Certainly would. I agree. Do we have any other questions or comments for Ms. Drum?
I have
one, since I may not get the opportunity to be the alternate member here in appearance, but as most of you know, or that I don't know in the room, I'm as pro-lagoon, pro-saving what we can as probably most of the folks up here. But when you change land use, and Indian River County is a low-density, low-growth, 35-foot-high community. We already dedicate 20+% on average for stormwater on site. Every time that number goes up, we develop now at average about 1.6 units to the acre. That's pretty low, but it's driving the back-end cost. So you've got groups that want affordable housing, workforce housing, first responder housing, and as you squeeze one, if you tighten one, it's going to show up somewhere else. So you just have to think through the balance of how to balance the environment with all the other things that are tugging at us at the same time. I think the idea is if you keep things out before they get in, that's always good. If you look at some of the cities, I'll use Vero Beach as an example, not for any particular reason, just because I was born and raised there. But when you look at the impervious area of most cities that were developed over the last 50, 60 years, their ratio of ground cover of asphalt or concrete is traditionally much higher than when you get outside of the city limits area. I don't know what the exact ratios are, but when you look at those footprint areas, they're much higher percentage of impervious area than the new development that comes in. So who was picking up the shortfall was the undeveloped land in one area picking up the shortfall from the runoff from these areas that have high percentages of impervious area. And now they have the right to use theirs, so that water that may have been moving onto theirs doesn't have the ability to do that anymore, which then gives the effect that development is causing the problem, but is it or isn't it? Or is it putting the burden back to where that water actually came from? So it just has to keep in mind all the other elements of it. We'd all like to say we'd like to do everything, but everything has a price, and at some point you can't afford the price, and if you can't afford it, it's a dream, and then it goes on the shelf and collects dust. So kind of look at reality-based, how do we try to balance it with everything? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Deb, you have anything else?
I don't.
Very good, thank
Thank
you. I appreciate it. Any other comments, questions? I would like to just touch on we had a presentation at our Brevard County Commission meeting this past week, and it focused on the events created by Irma. We had quite a few sewer failures. We dumped, I think it was 80 million gallons of, it was called raw sewage at the time. We now know it wasn't raw, it was mixed with water and stormwater, but it was still, as Dr. DeFries said, it's hard to rationalize failure. So we had a failure with our sewer system. And so we had our folks look at the problems as they exist, and that ranged from sewer pipe that was laid in the 90s on the cheap because taxpayers didn't want to spend the money that was necessary to put good pipe in the ground. Well, we've gotten past that. We're going to put in ductile iron pipe now that's got a life expectancy of about 100 years. So that's a big plus. One of the other problems discussed was infiltration of stormwater, even pool water that's illegally funneled by the public into the sewer system. We had one lift station that can handle 8.5 million gallons per day. During the Irma event, it was trying to push through 16 million gallons a day. So it wasn't just sewer water or water that came from Irma, it was water that came from Irma by way of our public, funneling pool water, even drainage systems, funneled right into the system. So we exposed an awful lot of problems. Irma helped us expose them. And so we're going to move forward with lift station upgrades, and we're going to do smoke tests to determine where this infiltration is coming from. We have an awful lot of plants that are already in place where we've been relining sewer pipes. So we're addressing these and the other problems that were revealed by Irma. So I just wanted to give an update on that as well. Okay, moving right along. Dr. DeFries, do you want to
I'm going to be real brief on this introduction. Number one, fantastic discussion. We are going to be talking about the Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan for every meeting that comes through the next year or more until it's completed. And you're going to hear from our contractor. Marcy Frick is going to talk about the project side. And so what we're doing a little differently than most national estuary programs is, as you all well know, the storyline has been, well, show us some projects, and we've been very project and implementation oriented. And so as our contractor is moving forward to assemble that, what I would call the wish list, it is going to be iterative, it's going to be a moving target, we at staff are beginning to build that new revision of the CCMP. And we will give you updates, each time we move forward. But I want this on the record because it's important. We've already had a couple of people call and say, well, you're not going to tell us what to do. We're non-regulatory. The CCMP is going to be this broad guidance, but with specificity on how science tells us to move forward for a restored lagoon. And in the appendix, there's going to be this series of projects, and these projects are being driven to us by the cities, by the counties, by the feasibility study we did with DEP and Water Management District. And you're going to see today not only the amount of incredible work our contractor is doing, but it gives you a little bit of scale of need as we look at this full restoration. Ultimately, when we're done with the CCMP, it's going to go back to who owns this problem, who's responsible for this footprint of problem. And what I'm super excited about, as we all should be, is that the cities are engaged. They're fully on board and moving forward, as are you all from the county. And so we finally do have the basis of a national estuary program that is functional from top to bottom. And this is the beginning of looking to the next 10 years on what do we need to do in the next 10 to make the system better. And these projects are illustrative of, the scale of the need and the scale of the finances to actually do the work. So, Marcy, we appreciate all the hard work you've been doing.
Marcy, you have the floor.
Good morning. That was a great overview of what we've been working on, and the discussion that we've just had here is going to tie in perfectly. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the projects we've collected to date. As Dwayne mentioned, we are looking for those projects in the future, the ideas of how we're going to continue the restoration in the lagoon. And we're asking for projects in the following categories: stormwater, groundwater, muck removal, habitat restoration, education and outreach, as well as monitoring and research. So the first step that we've started with is reaching out to the local governments. This includes the 5 counties and the 38 municipalities that are highlighted on the map here within the NEP boundaries. To date, we have received projects from all 5 counties. Some of these projects have come from existing plans, such as the Volusia County Mosquito Lagoon RA Plan, the Martin County Water Quality Needs Assessment, the Brevard County Save Our Indian River Lagoon Projects Plan. And of the 38 municipalities, we have received information from 22 of them. I have talked to, emailed, left messages for the other 16, and there is still some more information coming in, so we do hope to have responses from all the local governments. We will then start coordinating with some of the state agencies and universities and other resources to see what other project types are out there. So to give a quick overview of what we've received so far, starting with the stormwater projects, we've received a wide variety of projects going from traditional stormwater treatment like wet detention and swales and denitrification, or detention, sorry, as well as some new types of treatment of using bioabsorption activated media to help increase the denitrification and get some more nutrient removal in those systems. Bioswales, we've even got some flood control projects that have water quality benefits, so we've gotten a little bit of everything. In summary, we've received 207 stormwater projects to date. On these next few slides, I'm going to provide some costs and nutrient reduction benefits. I'm going to caveat that we have not quite gotten all the costs and nutrient reduction information yet, and we're working on completing that. So this is only going to be a fraction of what you'll ultimately see. But the stormwater projects that we do have information for are a little over $181 million. Will address about 372,000 pounds of nitrogen reductions and about 79,000 pounds of phosphorus reductions. For the groundwater projects, we've received projects to connect septic systems to the sewer system, projects to upgrade the septic systems. Traditional septic systems are not nutrient reduction systems, so there's new technology out there to achieve that, as well as wastewater treatment facility upgrades. Most of the wastewater plants in the basin do not discharge to the lagoon. That water goes to reuse, which is a fantastic use of that water. However, there are some facilities that have very high nutrient concentrations still, so there were some projects to improve that nutrient treatment so that the reclaimed water doesn't have as high of nutrients. To date, we've received 66 groundwater projects, and those costs are about $396 million. They'll reduce about 310,000 pounds of nitrogen and 33,000 pounds of phosphorus. For the muck removal projects, these projects will address muck within the lagoon itself, as well as the major canals and tributaries to the lagoon. We've received 23 projects at a cost of about $205 million. That'll reduce more than 488,000 pounds of nitrogen and about 70,000 pounds of phosphorus. We've also received a variety of habitat restoration projects. These include projects in the lagoon itself by creating oyster reefs and living shorelines, as well as projects up in the watershed to add conservation lands and buffers and improve the hydrology so to help the water quality coming to the lagoon itself. We've received 33 habitat restoration projects at a cost of about $27 million, reducing more than 21,000 pounds of nitrogen and about 7,200 pounds of phosphorus. We also have some education and outreach projects. We've received 4 of them to date. One was to increase funding to the Blue Life program. The City of Satellite Beach gave us 2 programs, the Stormwater Education Application through Stewardship and the Junior Sustainability Board. And then we also have the Brevard County effort to expand education around the fertilizer ordinance to increase compliance. Those projects have a cost of about $639,000 and will reduce about 6,400 pounds of nitrogen and 870 pounds of phosphorus. In addition, we're collecting some monitoring and research projects. There's also a separate effort to do look into the research that's needed, but we have received 9 projects to date. These include muck evaluations to look at where there are muck deposits and the nutrients associated with those, microbial source tracking to find human sources of bacteria. By addressing those human sources of bacteria, we're also addressing a nutrient load to the lagoon. Septic system modeling to figure out what areas of septic systems are contributing a load and how much to help prioritize where to do those projects. Master planning and project monitoring to better and more smartly implement these projects. And then a project from St. Lucie County to look at the transformation and bioavailability of organic nitrogen from urban and agricultural stormwater. These 9 projects have an estimated cost of about $11 million. Since they are monitoring and research, they don't result in any nutrient reductions, although they will help us plan more smartly for those nutrient reductions. In summary, we've received 342 projects to date at a cost, again, only for those projects without cost information, of about $818 million, reduced about 1.2 million pounds of nitrogen and 190,000 pounds of phosphorus. On this slide, there's some average cost per pound for the nutrients removed for each category, and that kind of gives you an idea of, where's the most cost-effective ways to achieve some of these reductions. As I just discussed, each of these main categories have some subcategories, so we can start looking at the cost-benefit of each of those subcategories and figure out the best way to tackle each of these sources. So moving forward, we will continue to gather those projects from the local governments and fill in the gaps on the costs and the nutrient reductions. We'll also start reaching out to those other resources to get some additional projects, factor in some of the ideas you all were just talking about. And then we want to start comparing those project reductions to the sources in each area of the lagoon. We're looking at the Halifax River, Banana River Lagoon, North IRL, Central IRL, and the Southern IRL around the St. Lucie River. And that's just to make sure we have the right types of projects in the right areas and figure out where we need to fill in the gaps. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Mr. Tadowski.
Whenever you calculated the average cost per pound of nutrient removal, what type of horizon did you use? Was it a 5-year program, 20 years? Because obviously over the 20-year period, that was reduced exponentially.
That's a good point. Right now, this is just based on the total cost. We did receive some annual O&M information, so we should add that in. And as Dwayne mentioned, we are planning on 10 years, so we could add that 10-year of O&M to the cost and factor that in. So at the moment, it's just the total project cost.
Turn your microphone on.
Sorry about that back there. The reason why I asked that question is because when we look at return on investment, we need to be looking at the total return on investment. When we're talking to our constituents and we say it's $2,900 average cost per pound for nitrogen or phosphorus, then that's the immediate cost. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, now you're reducing that cost exponentially, and now you see the return on the investment, because the general public is not going to understand that, and we've got to explain that. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to chime in on that. You're absolutely on point on that comment. I am on the record more than a few times about being worried about commoditizing project value on a single nutrient or a single benefit. And I'll give you a good example. If I take a septic system off, I prevent that load once, but I also prevent it for a number of years. But very often, if you compared, let's say, muck dredging, which has a really big bang for the buck, against oyster reef restoration, we don't calculate the fact that these oyster reefs are removing nutrients every single year, and if they're successful, they're growing, plus denitrification. So this whole project, delivery, it's a tough calculation, and we're never going to have this so tightly metric that you're going to be able to compare directly apples to oranges, but we need to be careful that we don't fall into kind of this simplistic market commoditization perspective, because it's going to change. So early on, it's going to be cheaper to reduce nutrients in a lot of these projects. And as we start getting our nutrient loads and the easy projects done, some of the more complicated projects, that same type of project, the cost per unit pound removed starts going up as we get closer to our targets. So we're going to need to be careful as we move forward in implementation to keep a broad perspective and a, what I would call a good common sense business approach, so we don't overanalyze this.
Thank you for your input. Mr. Fielding?
Could you go back to your page with those per unit costs, please, ma'am? I think it's about the last slide. Are you able to go back? Or?
Oh, I'm on it right now. I'm there. Yeah.
I don't know I don't know what source of information, what are y'all monitoring source? I don't know what we're looking at. We're looking at inflows and measuring. I don't know exactly how we're determining what and primarily we're looking at phosphorus and nitrogen. There's other things, but so how are we determining this? What kind of monitoring or measurements? What are we doing to come up with amounts? Now, I don't mean the amounts that we anticipate or hope that we're able to offset, but how are you all? What data are you using? What's the source of your data?
For the nutrient estimates?
Yes, ma'am.
So we've collected those from the local stakeholders. So a lot of those have been either calculated through the Basin Management Action Plans or the county plans, using local models and standard efficiencies. And so we are going through all that and making sure the estimates were done consistently so that we're comparing them accurately. Okay,
because here's a basic question, and you may have already incorporated all of that. We've got some folks here from Orca, though, that may have more information available. And Dr. With FIT, with the
John Treffery? Muck? Treffery.
Here's my understanding of that situation. And Warren, and who's with you, Warren? I can't see that far back. Okay. But my understanding is when we are involved in killing the grasses, the organics in the water, I don't know if we're measuring that, because it's my understanding when we kill those organics that they very quickly become a nitrogen feed. an ammonia feed, which really almost immediately becomes available for these cyanobacteria. Warren, you know more about this than I do, and or Leroy, you know a whole lot more about it than I do, so don't let me go way wrong. But that may be an area of measurement that we might not be getting full appreciation of, because that's almost an instantaneous kind of thing, and it's not something that's coming down a pipe, but it's something that here we've got these grasses. In fact, Mr. Stevens made mention of that. So here are these grasses, and we're killing the grasses, and almost immediately as we kill those grasses, they're going into deterioration, and they're going into this creation of this ammonia. And Dr. Treffery also strongly suggested that the muck, as we do things with the muck, as we change the top layers, that then liberates a lot more nitrogen. I mean, I don't know how are we measuring? Are we taking into account some of these activities?
So that's going to be part of the next step, is we want to start putting numbers on those sources in the lagoon, and I know we plan on working with the STEM Advisory Committee with that, so we want to try to get a better picture of what all those sources are, and then see if the projects we've received kind of match that magnitude, or if there's gaps where, like that, maybe we should be treating the algae and the invasive plants differently instead of just spraying them and letting them die off immediately. So we can look at things like that.
So we are going to look at that?
Yes, we are. So there's moving parts, and there are multiple parts. Part of the 10 milestones that we chose for that high bar delivery this year, so we were working on, what are the 10 big questions for science that will feed into this discussion? What are the needs for monitoring? And I think we're all in agreement that we're not monitoring. We have really good monitoring in some places, but not in all places. And in some areas, we have big gaps. I think we'd all agree as scientists that our nutrient budget isn't as tight as we would like it because we don't know all the real quantitative numbers for all of the source loads. And in some cases, we may not have that, but we can't wait for perfect science. And so the success stories of Tampa Bay, Long Island Sound, Chesapeake Bay, and Narragansett Bay is you move forward with the largest amount of nutrient reduction or pollutant reduction or stormwater, freshwater reduction that you can based on available dollars. And so this is the beginning. This project list, and Marcy, correct me if I'm wrong, but many of these projects are estimates based on concept. They're not at 60% design and engineering, and so they're just giving us a general sense of cost benefit, and as we move this list, along with that CCMP, there'll be some convergence, but this list is not a prioritized list to go start spending money, but there are projects in there that we may very well move forward. I know the Water Management District's already moving on Crane Creek based on the feasibility study, and that had pretty tight nitrogen and phosphorus removal levels. So these projects are not all at the same scale of evolution in their design and engineering. So it's a generalized beginning to look at the scope of different projects, and there's a lot of gaps. So you're absolutely right, Commissioner. This is just the beginning of looking at a whole suite of needs.
Thank you, sir.
Any other thoughts, comments? Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you.
I have a speaker's card from Mr. Yulovich.
Mr. Chair, just
Ms. Denny's?
one question. Are these supporting documents attached to our agenda? I didn't see, or will they be online attached to the agenda?
We're going to put them online.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marcy and I go way back on BMAP, so she knows where I'm going to come from. The same criticism I had when Mr. Tredick was doing the stormwater feasibility study was, and I don't want to be viewed as the person that's trying to change the menu after dinner's being served, but I have concerns that the net that we're casting for information is limited. Marcy said, the cities and municipalities, and I've continually sat up here and said, in the back room, we have the district engineer for the Melbourne Tillman 298 district, who sits on the management board. We have In Indian River County, we probably have 100,000 acres plus under the jurisdiction of 298 and 189 districts. We need to talk to them. In St. Lucie County, Chris, we have Fort Pierce Farms, St. Lucie Water Control District. We have agriculture co-ops of 20,000 acres. We need to reach out. We have private landowners. So we need to not be, and I'm not saying this critical, myopic into counties, municipalities, but we need to cast the net to include those entities because they are a critical jurisdictional regulatory entity that oftentimes is the point source for a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. Most of these 298s and 189s, the side banks are cut 1.5 to 1. So you get a lot of side back dissipation and transport of sediment into the system of the counties and into eventually the lagoon. So all I'm asking is that we cast that net a little wider and deeper than we have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As a board, we've focused on taking action through the funding of projects. Today, we'll have some short updates on 3 projects that have been completed or are close to completion. So I'd like to ask Kate Brown to come forward, please.
Well, before I begin, just want to say thanks for allowing me to update you on our awesome project, and I hope you enjoy the numbers that you see today. So for those, is this one working? Can you hear me? Okay. So for those that aren't familiar with our Restore Shores program, just to give you a little overview of our history, we have about 10 years of oyster restoration experience and community engagement. We started with the UCF Oyster Mat Project in Mosquito Lagoon, working with them, and since then we have started an oyster gardening project with Brevard County, and that grows live oysters to be put onto our installed reefs. And so with the anticipation of completing our goals in Mosquito Lagoon, we have now, last year, we applied for a education and community outreach grant that we were awarded through NEP, and that was used to create the Restore Our Shores project, which was then adopted as the entire program's title. So Restore Our Shores now encompasses the oyster gardening project, the mats, and thanks to NEP funding last year, we were able to add shoreline vegetation through our Adopt a Mangrove project. Now, I just want to highlight some of our 2016-2017 accomplishments through our last year's award. We had 55 formal community workshops and events, and then on top of that, we also have daily maintenance and care through our volunteers. So we were able to accomplish everything with over 2,000 volunteers, and they gave over 3,500 volunteer hours. We were able to supply materials to be able to install a footprint of over 720 linear feet. That includes 26 reef modules with our required manatee breaks in between, and we planted 100 linear feet of native shoreline vegetation. That includes Spartina, black mangroves, red mangroves, and this was the first planting that our oyster project had ever accomplished, so we learned a lot, we'll say. We have now named all of our successful mangroves, so you'll have to go out and see Goliath. He made it through Hurricane Irma. And so this project has given towards different methodologies that this whole program utilizes. So we historically made oyster mats in the past, and we're very supportive of those. They're great outreach tools and a great unique approach to the problem that was plaguing Mosquito Lagoon. However, we're trying to adapt and find the best use here in Brevard County. So we're trying to find, one, if they are usable here in Brevard County, and two, how we can do that. And so we're trying to find different methodologies. I'll actually go back to my last slide. So we're trying to collaborate them with the oyster bags that we're making. So at certain sites like Riverside Park, we actually, we call it a speed bump reef because it has bags on the bottom and then mats in a quilted form laying on top of that to offer recruitment. It's a very low profile reef. We also have mats in coordination with bags on the bottom. So we'll have a big quilt of mats and then put live oyster bags on top of that. And we're just trying to figure out the best use for them here. We know that we have a lot of classrooms. It's easier to take to them, you know, to get to do and get to be involved. And so if that can be continued, we would love that. A little bit about our program's accomplishments, though. Just this year, we were able to include a linear we were able to install over 2,000 linear feet of restored shoreline. Just to give you an idea, that's nearly half a mile of shoreline restored, and overall since 2015, we've done just a little over 4,000. So over half of what we've ever done in Brevard County was done this past year. So we've had a really big year, and we're really excited for all that we've got to do. We've gotten to take away a lot of methodologies that we now know how to, or that need to be tweaked. We've seen a lot of things that if we were to continue with the pace that we're working at, as you saw in that picture earlier, we're a small team, so we depend on volunteers and partners. And so we're looking at maybe changing up some of our just ways of doing things to be most efficient. We can't tell you how many times we've moved shell bags. And so if we can find a different way to do that, we would really like that. We also actually had a new adventure this year. If you look on the map at Geiger Point, that's one of our biggest reefs that we've ever done. It has a footprint of 1,300 linear feet, and that'll be 1,040 linear feet of actual oyster reef installed. That's our biggest reef we've ever built. It took months to do that with over hundreds of volunteers and time, and we've learned different ways to accommodate high water levels. So in the past, our water depth is typically to our shins, to our knees. We're only usually 10 meters from shore, but at this particular site and with our stormy season, we were actually having to wear weight belts with snorkel masks to accomplish building these reefs. So little different this year, a lot to do, a lot that we were able to accomplish. We were also really proud to show the comparison post-storms. So here is at Douglas Park. It's part of our Living Shoreline demonstration site, which I encourage you all to go check out. It's in Indy Atlantic, right past the 192 Causeway. It's at Douglas Park, Eastminster Presbyterian Shoreline, and then over to Riverside Park. And so it shows how oyster reefs can be used with seawalls, can be used on a natural shoreline, and can be used with a rocky revetment. So here on the left shows you post-Matthew, when before we had constructed anything, and on the right is post-Irma, when our revetments and our breakwaters were installed. So really proud of the comparison there. We're also really excited to see how much the community has gotten involved with our shucking, our shell recycling. We're part of the Shuck and Share program, but specifically just through the Zoo's coordination here in Brevard County. Just this past project award year, 805,442.5 pounds worth of shell was recycled. So that's quite a lot. Our Shuck and Share restaurant specifically, we're able to donate 27,200 all the way up to our local shucking house, which is our biggest source of shell, at 775,000 nearly. So it's a lot of oyster shells. Something that we did encounter this year that was a newer factor that we hadn't quite thought of was that Hurricane Harvey actually influenced these numbers in a negative way. So a lot of the shucking houses supply comes from Texas, and Hurricane Harvey decimated a lot of the aquaculture there, and they say it'll take about 3 years to really get back to where they were. So we've actually been getting a lot of empty dumpsters because the source just isn't there. So it's something for us to consider, but this is a really great, still high number, and since 2015 that we've been recycling this, we have over 3 million pounds of recycled shell. So something really great to be a part of, and we're really proud of it. So I just want to say thanks for NEP and all of our other partners and volunteers and funding sources to make all of this possible. So I tried to go quick so that I wouldn't take all your time, but if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer that. If not, you're more than welcome to email any of us, and we'll get with you as soon as we can.
Questions, comments? Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
And our next speaker will be David Peters from the City of Stewart.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to appear today, and I will briefly get to the PowerPoint. As you may be aware, the City of Stewart has a septic to sewer expansion program citywide. This discussion and this update is on the St. Lucie Sewer Basin, which we partnered with you to install sewer lines to about 200 homes along the St. Lucie River. First and foremost, thank you for participating with us. Without that funding, this project couldn't have been done. Our program consists of an entire service area, 13 basins within that basin, within that service area, utilizing small diameter pipes called a low pressure sewer system. Individual grinder tanks are installed at each home, and those basins were prioritized with both the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the Martin County Health Department to ensure that we looked at historic septic tank failures as well as the proximity to water bodies. And it is a voluntary connection program. We do not have a mandatory connection policy in the city of Stewart. Here's a picture of our service area and the 13 basins. The St. Lucie Basin, which I'm talking about today, is on the far right-hand side, abutting the water. In April, of course, as you may recall, you gave us a grant of $485,000. We went forward with the engineering design. That was done in January. We had public information meetings, as we do with every basin. Invite the homeowners to a central location where we discuss the project so they know what's going on every step of the way. In March, the bid was opened and the contract was awarded. The project was completed for a total cost of $806,000, well below the $970,000 estimated cost. Construction activities, you can see a drawing of a directional drilling machine. Most of our work is done that way. So a lot of people don't even know the construction occurred. A number of phone calls that say, when are you coming? And the answer is, been there, done that. So anyway, our project is complete. Many homeowners have contacted us already about connecting to the sewer system. Our connection rate is in excess of 50% on a voluntary basis. We fully expect when the homeowners in the St. Lucie Basin, they have 1 year to sign up and save. And if they do, they can save up to $3,000. We fully expect more than 50% of those property owners to connect within the first year. And over the 10-year period, we expect at least 75% of those folks to connect. But once again, thank you on behalf of the city of Stewart. We'll be here before you again. We have 5 projects remaining that will complete the entire service area and provide sewer to the entire city. So thank you, and I'm here for any questions you may have.
I have a question for you. I don't remember where the graphic was. It was in the beginning about the grinder. At each home, you're going to have a grinder system?
We do. We have a grinder pump at each house.
Wow, that's amazing, because I know in Brevard County we have several areas where the area is low, so they have to use a grinder pump because they can't get the fluids to the...
Won't pump uphill.
Right.
Yeah.
So why do you find it necessary in your system to have them at every home?
Well, it's a small grinder station. It's costs about $3,000 to purchase, another $1,000 or $2,000 to put in the ground. Individuals, we install it, we remove the septic system, we disconnect the drain field, we put the electrical component in, and their sewer use is based on their water use. So each individual has their own grinder station. We've got about 700 installed to date. Of the 700, I think I can count on my right hand how many pump failures we've actually had. During a hurricane event, we have an actual generator receptacle on the side of the tank so that we can respond after the all clear has been issued with small generators on the back of trucks so that we can pump those down. So yeah, that's just the low pressure sewer system. It depends on individual grinder tanks. Some of the vacuum stations or the vacuum systems that you may have heard about can have multiple connections on one tank. But we elected to go to the low pressure sewer system, small diameter pipe, less capital cost up front, has worked for us so far.
And that's one of the reasons why you don't have to dig up the streets and make a mess to put these pipes in.
Amazing technology is directional drilling. And if you can have a property owner that didn't know you went by their house, you've won the war. Because that is the biggest challenge when you go to septic to sewer is not only the cost, but the destruction of the right-of-way as you do it. So.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Jesse Wales from the Marine Discovery Center.
Good morning, everybody. All right. My name is Jessie Wales. I am the program manager for Shuck and Share, which is a community-based oyster restoration or oyster recycling program based out of the Marine Discovery Center in New Smyrna Beach. So today I'm just going to be giving you a brief overview of our program and some of the successes we've had since 2014. So Shuck and Share was established in Volusia County in 2014 because our partners saw a need for a stable source of recycled oyster shells. We were able to secure a grant through the IRL NEP to start our oyster recycling program, and we provide our shell for our partner organizations. So to date, we've expanded to 4 counties. We've partnered with Brevard Zoo down in Brevard County, which Kate just spoke about. We've partnered up with the Friends of Gamble Rogers State Park in Flagler County. We've partnered with the University of Central Florida in Orange County and Seminole County, and we are currently working on partnering with CCA in Lake County and Coastal Connections down in Indian River County. So it is my goal to have Shuck and Share kind of take over Florida. So fingers crossed that happens for us. So to date, since starting in 2014, we've recycled almost 400,000 pounds of shell. So to put that into perspective, that's about 200 tons or the weight of a full-size blue whale. So we've kept all of that out of our Volusia County landfills, which we're very proud of. Shuck and Share is very much a volunteer-run program. Our volunteers pick up shell from 10 local restaurants. They help us bag up the shell, and they help our partners to distribute the shell along our shorelines. So we've created over 11,000 bags so far, and I'm happy to say that all 11,000 bags are out in the lagoon doing what they're meant to do to help restore our shorelines and restore our oyster beds. We've engaged almost 4,000 citizens in this adventure, and they have donated almost 7,000 hours of their time towards the Shuck and Share program. Some of our numbers from last year, so this is our 2017 infograph. We've distributed this amongst our partners as well as the internet and through New Smyrna Beach. So it's a lot of the same information that you saw on the previous slide. However, I wanted to point out that Off the Hook, which is one of our larger grossing restaurants, contributes about 49% of our shell. They are very, very engaged. They love to post about us on Facebook. They have a bunch of our marketing materials in their restaurants, and they've contacted us about opening up a second location in Ponce Inlet, so we're hoping that our shell will double by the end of next year. Our partners have restored 890 meters of shoreline along public and state parks. So this isn't just in the Indian River Lagoon, this is also going up into the Tomoka Basin at North Peninsula State Park, as well as over on the Gulf Coast in Bradenton as well. So just to make a point, Shuck and Share itself does not do any shoreline restoration, but we provide all of those shells and volunteers for our partners to accomplish their goals. We're very thankful to have a great sponsorship with Waste Pro, which is one of our waste management companies up in Volusia County, and they have collected 73% of our shell for us. They go to 2 of our larger grossing restaurants, Off the Hook being one of them, and collect the shell because our volunteers would not be able to get that amount of shell. So through the IRL NEP last year, through a grant, we were able to start the shuckandshare.org website. So while we have a few partners in different counties, we wanted shuckandshare.org to encompass all oyster recycling organizations in Florida. So there are a couple of organizations that have their own recycling programs, and we decided to list them on the website. The goal of the website is that citizens, community members, organizations can go on this website and find out about partners in their area doing shoreline restoration work, as well as restaurants in their area. So if you guys wanted to go up and have dinner up in Flagler County, you'd be able to go to the Shuck and Share website, find a restaurant that's going to recycle shells, and know that the half dozen you're going to have is going to go back into the lagoon to help us out. On this website, we also have an interactive map, so members can click on the map and see the closest area that is recycling shells or has different shoreline projects. We have a projects page which features all of the shoreline projects that have used Shuck shells from Shuck and Share. And we have an Oysters 101 page, so we wanted to make this very user-friendly. So some people don't understand why oysters are important, so by putting that Oysters 101 page on there, we can give them a very brief overview of why we are so obsessed with these little guys. And to end on a kind of fun note, We were recently featured on How to Do Florida. So How to Do Florida is a local television show that shows a bunch of different cool things that you can do in Florida. So they've decided that oyster recycling is a lot of fun, which I don't know if my volunteers would agree with you, but they keep coming back. So they came out and did a segment with us. It was only about 1.5 minutes, but as you can see, it had almost 27,000 views on Facebook alone. So this show is going to be featured on, I believe it's ABC or one of the local affiliates, and it's also over on YouTube as well. So who knows how many people we've reached with Shuck and Share at this point. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions or comments for Jesse?
Mr. Chair, just one comment of encouragement. Just keep up the good work. I've been to several community organizations and events where you're represented and you engaged the community as well as the partners for great success. So keep it up, expand the program, and I'm glad for your zeal and your youth and your energy. This is a great program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse.
I have to say, I'm very impressed with the whole presentation, but I was particularly interested in, and it piqued my interest, the dining thing, that people can reach out and say, yeah, I want to go there because they'll recycle my shells. I just think that's a terrific idea.
So there's one restaurant in Volusia County, I won't name them, but they are not interested in recycling shells with us. I think it has to do with a smell issue that they're worried about, even though we figured all that out. But on the How to Do Florida comments, people are commenting to see if this particular restaurant is participating. And when we commented back and said that they weren't, they were very upset about it. So we're hoping that by this getting out there, people would be more interested in joining Shuck and Share.
That's outstanding.
Yeah. Exactly.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll move into consent agenda. We have 2 items. Anyone wish to pull any of these items or have comments on them?
Chair, move approval of consent agenda. As presented.
We have a motion and a second. Anyone wish to vote no? It passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, actually, for the record, does my appointment go in the consent and this will be included in that? Make sure we're on the record.
New business.
New business, thank you.
New business, yeah, well, that's coming up. Okay, we have no old business. Okay, Ms. Denny's, you're up. Agenda item 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I would like to appoint Mayor Doug Gibson from the city of Oak Hill under the banner of the Volusia League of Cities on our management board.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any comment? Anyone wish to vote no? Passes unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you, board.
What do we have for initiation? Does he have to wash dishes or what?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to just interject if I might. The city of Oak Hill has been working really hard with the leadership of the mayor. I've been up there to move, the whole city to sewer, and I just want to congratulate you on your vision. This isn't just an environmental issue. This is an economic and growth issue for communities. And when you see communities like Oak Hill, that historic fishing village, moving forward to improve infrastructure and water quality, we should applaud that. And so I'm really happy to have not just Oak Hill, but the league on board, because this is going to happen, a lot of it, at the city level, and that leadership is deeply appreciated. So thank you.
I want to thank you also. When I saw that and I saw what your city is doing, I just said, wow, this is huge. So thank you very much. Oh, it will be. It will be. Okay, we'll move into agenda item 10, our informational reports.
Actually, 9.
9? I can't count. Okay. Item 9, Executive Director.
I'm going to be very brief. In your folder, you have a quarterly update on our progress. For the remainder of this year, you will see that same format. So we're going to update you quarterly in writing on those 10 strategic goals that we had for this year. And call us if you have any questions or concerns. 3 points I want to make. Number 1, most important is that the calendar for 2018 is at the printer. We promise everybody that they will have their their stocking stuffers on time. The city's already calling. Kathy has done an amazing job. It's a beautiful calendar this year, and we should be hand delivering hopefully in a week to 10 days, but before the holiday. Each of you has gotten a copy of the annual report. I think Kathy has set a Tuesday end of business, correct? Deadline on your comments. Thanks to everybody who's commented so far. We're going to print on Wednesday, and so we really do need your input to make sure that we've gotten everything right. But also, Kathy has worked really hard, and it is going to be a strong and powerful statement of success that actually showcases projects beyond just our funding. So we've highlighted both of the water management districts, DEP, and the counties, and we'll continue to do that. And then lastly, we are ready to issue our RFPs for fiscal year 2018-2019 as soon as we're kind of through the internal legal review. And so I just want to make that announcement. Everybody who's listening, everybody in the audience, the deadline is extended, so it's not going to be before the holidays, but we will be on the street with RFPs shortly. And that will start to set up that project review for our next fiscal year that begins October 18. And that's all I have.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Dr. DeFries, how many calendars are being printed in the initial stage?
Kathy?
25,000. And do we take a donation for the calendars, or are they just free to the public, or?
We have not taken donations in the past. They're free to the public. I'll share a quick story with you all. When I first came on board, my first thought is, where do we need to maybe cut expenditures? And I said, well, how good is this calendar? And Kathy kind of went, wait until you deliver the first round. And so I actually hand-delivered the beaches all the way into Volusia County, and I have never been hugged so much or reprimanded for how late we had delivered. These are educational, and we have gone to a very, you'll see, we've gone to a very specific educational what you can do approach. We targeted that number based on historic use so we don't have leftovers. And so they are all being used. They go to the libraries, they go to the municipalities, and then we'll have a few boxes on reserve during the year. But we have not collected dollars. Our new website, however, will have a PayPal donation component to it.
And the reason why I asked the question is, and I think it's a great idea just as an education component of what we do, but maybe on the Facebook, encourage a donation for one and have it sent, and the cost of actually shipping it to the individual plus a small, donation to the NEP. The other side of that is each of us has our tax collector's office, and the license plate program is very successful, and I think that they should be included with each license plate, whether it's for the lagoon, whatever the case, for our funding side, so that we can continue to encourage folks to maintain their participation in the license program, and even maybe encourage those who may come for a license and say, would you like this, and continue to help to support the license plate program.
That's a great idea. We'll talk to the license plates. I don't know what the restrictions are in motor vehicles with that. They've got some pretty, rigid restrictions on how you advertise, but we'll check that. But as long as you brought this up, I'll go ahead and make the first announcement then for next year's calendar for 2019. If a corporate sponsor wants to sponsor that in its entirety, give me a call.
Excellent idea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Monthly financial statements?
That's for information only, no action necessary unless there's questions for Frank.
We're good? All righty. Then we are going to our recognition awards.
Member reports first, sir.
That's missing.
Item 11.
Item 11. I don't have an item 11.
That's on me. So member reports.
All righty. Member reports. Anyone have?
Start at this end?
Start at your end.
Mr. Chairman, NEP Council, You have heard me bring up the subject of biosolids and the challenges. Earlier tonight, we talked about, earlier this morning, I guess, we talked about systemic issues, that which is reducing and removing the contaminants before it ever gets into the system to save us money in the long range effort. St. Lucie County has expended tens of millions of dollars to remove contaminants from the system, as has each of us. Each of our agencies has been participatory in that process. St. Lucie County has its Basin Management Action Plan. It's a part of the Lake Okeechobee watershed, as well as the Indian River Lagoon watershed as an impaired water, as indicated by the EPA for now 25 years. That said, St. Lucie County has moved forward with a commercial composting ordinance, that which is and provides regulatory components for outdoor composting of biosolids. We no longer provide the opportunity for outdoor composting, open air composting, for many reasons. Number one, aerosolized ammonia easily moving through the air. The other is any drainage off of any open air area of agriculture, which drains into the drainage system. Can go into any of the irrigation canals that maybe organic farmers would be drawing from, and completely contaminating their ability to recover or to sell their product at the market. So we have come up with an ordinance specific to Class B, Class C biosolids and commercial composting, so that it protects the local farmers, it protects anybody who would draw from agricultural canals from human waste, bacteria components, as well as removing any of that from the system in the case of at least one project that may come to St. Lucie County is a direct input to the C-25 canal and immediately into the lagoon. That said, we have had significant pushback from really just one group that has been trying to do this. And so we believe that we've created an ordinance that provides for the ability for somebody who wants to be in the Milorganite business to be in business. It's appropriate. There are Milorganite corporations, businesses around the country that are very successful in treating Class B, Class A, Class C biosolids into Milorganite properly. So we believe that our ordinance is fair, reasonable, and provides those who wish to participate and invest in those types of businesses can. But we completely reject the idea of open air commercial composting of biosolids in our agricultural areas, which would drain into our community. That said, we have developed and created House Bill 641, in which Representative Larry Lee Jr. is bringing forward to the state. It is a local bill. It simply focuses on the St. Lucie County's watershed specifically. It would affect no other county. 67 counties, only St. Lucie County would be affected in this local bill. And literally, it changes the last line of what already exists in language in Florida statute, and simply identifies that biosolids are not duplicative in regulatory concerns. The Florida statute clearly identifies biosolids as different than bona fide agriculture. We are an agricultural community, have been for 100+ years, and we believe in agriculture, bona fide agriculture, but we don't believe that human waste processing in an agricultural setting, especially outdoors and unabated from discharge into our waterways, should be permitted. We're hoping that we can find a Senate sponsor. We have approached a nearby senator for support. Currently, we have not gained that support. I think it's reasonable to ask for that support simply because it is a local issue. And we would like you to know that House Bill 641 is important to St. Lucie County. It's important to our waterways. It's important to our farmers. But as important, the Indian River Lagoon, to which we spend hundreds of millions of dollars to protect, is at risk if this bill does not continue. So that's my local member report.
Thank you. Ms. Denny's?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not much, but I just want to congratulate the city of Stewart on the presentation on the septic to sewer. Dwayne will be talking to you about, see what we can do to work with the city of Oak Hill. We have a couple bills, as you know, in the legislature wasn't successful last season. Who knows what's going to happen as we navigate this session coming up too, but we're still at the table and working feverishly. If you could, this is no kidding. There are some areas in the Oak Hill area where they used to have 55-gallon drums serving in some of the areas. That is right into the lagoon. So this is an area of focus, of need, economic development, of course, but when we talk about the health of our water quality, we may not be as dense population-wise on the lagoon and the river as some of the other areas, but I would say that this is of critical importance. And we've identified community support and legislative support and are doing everything that we can within the system to make this work. So hopefully we can, with all of your assistance, keep this on the front burner because this will be just the springboard action to allow the rest of it to help and bring in the partners for development in that particular area. Thank you.
Mr. Fielding.
I think our movement towards a more defined CCMP is going to be crucial to our mission. And it's going to allow us as counties, as stakeholders, with the support of our other agency stakeholders, to then address these issues across the board, because it will give us a focal point that we can draw from and that we can move towards maybe eliminating some of these 55-gallon drum situations and some of these others. But it will give us opportunity to have a basis, a scientific basis for approaching these things, and not so much just a political tussle, but really the objective of achieving the betterment for the entire community. And so I see that, and the efforts that are being made by staff and the assistance that we have as well is going to really be the essence of what we were hoping that this group could accomplish. So to me, as you've expressed as well, this is an extremely important activity. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of things I wanted to let you know. Last year we invested additional funds in public education. We're resoliciting that in January, setting aside $1 million. Depending on demand, we can set aside more. And so I will make sure that Dwayne gets the solicitation so that he can let each of you know, because it's for public education like we know we need for yard management, lawn care, and septic to sewer if you're doing that kind of program, because public education is a key component of that. So I'll let Dwayne know about that. The other thing that we are, the department's better organizing and investing in is coastal resiliency, particularly with, in light of sea level rise and the challenges that our coastlines are beginning to see more and more. I think we've even touched on a couple of those today with more intense storms, things like that we're dealing with. So, our Florida Coastal Office is starting to, is putting an office together within it for dealing with coastal resiliency and better investing in that. And part of that is increasing our funding towards local governments to do resiliency planning, so that they can have better science and information on how they can improve their coastal resiliency. It's the perfect word. So as we put out solicitations, I'll make sure Dwayne has that. We do have a $3 million budget request in to increase our ability to do that and provide assistance to local governments for hurricanes, sea level rise, stormwater, whatever you're facing. because it's certainly in our future. And then the third thing is the governor did ask again for water infrastructure funds, and it's a $50 million ask. Traditionally, the legislature will take that $50 million and say, thanks for identifying the source of funds we can use for our member projects, and don't give it to the department. But we asked for it anyway because we know it's needed, and it can go towards septic to sewer. It can go towards sanitary sewer overflows. It can go towards stormwater projects. It can go towards muck removal, all the things that the Indian River Lagoon needs. And Marcy showed all the projects that we have on all those categories. So we will be advocating for that $50 million budget request, and any support would be appreciated.
Is that one-time funding or a continuous request?
It's continuous, whether we get it that way or not. It's because obviously the funding is more than $50 million, the funding need.
Mr. Chair, just to let Drew know, we have started our coastal resiliency planning project that was funded by EPA. So that is just starting, and it's mainly looking at risk assessment in this first round. We have a second round of funding that'll be part of the second RFP release that goes out. But I do want to let you know that FDOT is working with the Regional Planning Council with NOAA money. And so we've got a lot going on this coastal resiliency. We're going to need to make sure we're all talking to each other so we're not overlapping and, having redundancy in the workload. So I'll work with you and, make sure that everybody's kind of connected on that.
Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are busy at the South Florida Water Management District. There's no question about it. Just to hit on a couple of things that are going on in the district that affect the Indian River Lagoon. As many of you may know, the Calkins Water Farm, a public-private partnership in western Martin County. We had a ribbon cutting not too long ago, over 3,000 acres of water farming going on there. That's a tremendous project that's going to do a lot to help us in the C44 basin. Commissioner had mentioned earlier this week coming up, we have a McCarty Ranch expansion on December the 12th. Another great partnership with the Water Management District in St. Lucie County, City of Port St. Lucie. So we're looking forward to seeing that come online. Lake Okeechobee Watershed Project, we have a tentatively selected plan that should be coming out in January of 18, working with Army Corps of Engineers on that project on the north end of Lake Okeechobee in Glades County on about a 15,000 acre reservoir project. Everybody knows SB 10 and the EAA reservoir project that we're continuing to work on. Our staff has completed 7 public scoping meetings in the last 60 days or less. We have our 8th coming up next week. On top of everything else that we're doing, that's a tremendous amount of work. So if you have an opportunity to attend that next week, I would encourage that. But just a tremendous amount of progress going on with the EAA reservoir, and once again, that's going to be a huge benefit to our estuaries as well. The C44 project in western Martin County, that other partnership project with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, it is on schedule moving forward. That's going to be a huge benefit to us. And then our continued discussion our governing board is having with our staff on what you all know is deep well injection. What Bob Verasco on our staff calls estuary protection wells. I like that term. I'm hoping that what comes back to us, to the governing board, that our staff's able to show us that this is a viable alternative, because the numbers that we have seen in presentations have been very positive as to what it could potentially do. So we're hoping that what comes back to us continues to be positive in that light, because that would be a tremendous tool in the toolkit. There's other public-private partnerships that we're working on with private landowners in St. Lucie County, northern Okeechobee, southern Indian River County, that our staff continues to work with those private landowners. And I'm a big proponent of public-private partnerships to see what Calkins was able to do in a short amount of time for that amount of money, and to see the results that we can get from those type of projects in the basin and for the estuary. I'm very encouraged by that, and so I'm looking forward to working with other private landowners as we move forward. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think you guys have been busy. Very, very impressive.
And that's just a little bit of it.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Mr. Zork.
Yes, thank you. A few months back, some of you in the room attended a pilot project that a private company, these private-public partnerships are great. The best part of this one was the county contributed absolutely zero greenfield resource. We've gotten some of the data back, and unfortunately, Some of the data is inconclusive in terms of how much of a benefit this would add to drawing water out of our canal network, processing it and discharging back in clean oxygenated water. So we're sending them a letter inviting them to come back again for a second round of testing and trying to sync up and match up the goals and objectives of the testing side so that both the county's tests and the company's tests are all on the same page. But it was my guess is they put in $300,000 to $500,000 to fully underwrite and bring this project down and give it a try. So we encourage them to come back and thank them for their effort and their interest in the Indian River Lagoon. Secondly, there's still a considerable interest in what's called the Bethel Creek Flushing Pilot Project, so I'm going to continue to work on that as a commission member during the upcoming year. The report that came out for the the Northern Lagoon Flushing Connection, that's got some good information in it. You know, these are ideas. You have to kind of flush them out and see if they'll actually bring value, and not to tie in flush and flushing together and flushing with septic, but it does go well together.
Need to be flush with cash.
It is a constrained area that I think we have to look at what we can do to try to make it better through this or other options. Project-wise, we're about 50% through our Osprey Acres stormwater project, which will be really a really kind of a unique project where it's half stormwater, half kind of bird watching nature preserve, and kind of a fairly close into the city a location that's going to be great. It was originally called Coyote Run, but some of the neighbors thought that actually meant there was coyotes on the property. So we had to change the name to Osprey Acres, something a little more warm and fuzzy. Almost think of changing it back because most of the people really liked it when they realized there weren't coyotes out there that's going to be chasing them when they're going down the trail. Tallahassee-wise, we're working with our lobbying staff and others on the support of SB 786 and House Bill 339 to see where those might make it in this year's session. And that completes the update. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tredick.
Thank you. Yeah, St. John's is continuing to work on projects and focus on projects which benefit the lagoon. Dr. DeFries mentioned Crane Creek, which is a project that we're about to begin design on. Hopefully we'll have a contract executed here in the next couple of weeks and have that project design and permitting will take about a little over 18 months. And hopefully that project will be shovel ready going into our fiscal year, 2020 fiscal year, which is fall of 2019. So that's a nice flow restoration project that'll put water back in St. John's River, treat it, and get those nutrients out of the Indian River Lagoon and Crane Creek. A little update on O'Galley, which is a dredging project we're doing up in Melbourne. I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but it's going to remove about over 625,000 cubic yards of muck from the O'Galley River and Elbow Creek, which is its tributary. The project's got about 250,000 cubic yards that have been removed so far. The biggest challenge now is getting the water out of the muck, and DEP's been a great partner with the state appropriation. Brevard County's also been a fabulous partner, giving us the DMMA site and the permanent disposal site. We could not have done it without Brevard County, at least not for the cost that we're doing it at. And also the Florida Inland Navigation District has been a tremendous partner and contributed a lot of money to the project. So 3 good partners are working with us. The project's got about another, well, it's scheduled to be complete at the end of 2018 at this point. The problems with the muck dewatering, we'll see. We're working with the county on that and the DMMA site. There's a lot of other projects that the district is looking at which will help lagoon projects in the future. We're looking at a flowway on the western end in the upper St. Johns River, which has some phosphorus in it. If we get the phosphorus out of that, that could be a conduit for moving more water back to the St. Johns River. We have a couple projects, the Setilly Canal and also the C-54 project that we're in the feasibility study, which down the road, if we can clear the path for those projects, they'll be a lot more doable in the future. So we're looking into that. Of course, we have our annual cost share program and encourage all parties to take a look at that and submit applications when that comes up. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've had a lot of information today. Okay, my turn. Ms. part of my charge as being the chairman of this august body, it's my duty and honor to negotiate our contract with our esteemed director. And as someone who comes from the private sector with about 40 years of negotiating contracts with employees and former employees, I can tell you this was the easiest negotiation I've ever encountered, because our esteemed director, Dr. DeFries, he has no interest in changing his current 3-year contract, even though I think he is much deserving of additional compensation, but he has no interest in that at this point in time. So that makes it very easy for the rest of us going forward. But I would encourage each and every one of you to consider changing that next year when it comes up for negotiation, which I won't be part of because I won't be chair at that point in time. But I think that we should give Mr. DeFries, Dr. DeFries, some good cause to give us reasons why we shouldn't give him an increase. Because I can tell you, and I don't think I'm saying anything that everybody hasn't already figured out, that we wouldn't be where we are without him. So with that, that will conclude our reports.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Along with your comments, I just want to take us back a few months. Speaking of leadership, Dr. DeFries, when we were having our discussions about renegotiating the contract, he asked for support for his staff rather than for himself. And that's leadership, to take your staff and understand the value of your staff and make them a priority. That showed me then, as I had already known, that he is a great leader for us. And so I just wanted to point that out, because any raise that he would have gotten certainly was provided for by his staff, or to his staff, and that's important to know. As a leader, your staff is that important. So,
amen. Which I heartily concur, because we have a top-notch group of people working for us in the staff.
Mr. Chair, if I can just jump in real quickly, just so I understand. At the last meeting, we all talked about the performance appraisal, and I sent out the forms and received some of them back. And so I gather then what you're describing today would be an amendment to the contract on the same terms that would just extend it? Because as you all know, the contract is coming this year to its termination point. So the discussion has been, how are we going to change the contract so that we go beyond that time period? So to take the existing contract and extend it another 3 years, is that what we're suggesting? And if we are, then I would just request that the board make an official motion so we have documentation in the record, and then I can draft a very quick amendment to the contract that would extend it for that period of time, and you can authorize the chair to execute that amendment, and it will be concluded at that point.
Okay. So we have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we renew the existing contract for a period of 3 years, continuing from now.
We have a motion and a second. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
For the record, I just want to say thank you. It's an honor to be working with you and all these amazing volunteers behind us that we're going to recognize here in a minute. And this takes this distraction off the table, and we can get right back to work this year.
Okay, we'll move into our recognition awards. As we approach the holiday season and the end of a very busy year that the IRL has had, the IRL Council wants to say thank you to our citizen volunteers who make the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program work. So please stand up if you serve on our management conference committees. I'd like to see all those folks get some recognition, so please stand. Thank you. You have our deepest appreciation, because without your input, it would be very, very much more difficult to do what we do. So thank you for your gifts and your talents. We also want to give special recognition to several people who have shown exceptional leadership and dedication to the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program in 2017. First, we want to recognize some former IRL Council board members. One would be Kevin Powers, who was not able to make it today, but he sends his regards, and he told us that he will see us in January. And the 3 cities who formed the Indian River County Lagoon Coalition and joined the Indian River Council as founding members: the city of Fellsmere, city of Vero Beach, and the city of Sebastian. We want to give them a shout out also. And our chairs and vice chairs of our advisory committees. They work directly with our staff to ensure that the management conference has a voice. Thank you for all of your hard work. Bob Yulovich, chair, and Martin Smithson, vice chair of the management board.
If you're here, come on up.
We need you to come up here, sir, so we can throw some rocks at you.
And if we have representatives of the cities, please come on up. We'll do one picture with everybody, just so it's a little easier.
Okay. It's beautiful.
One of the pictures in the calendar of amazing pictures we got this year. So Bob, just hang out, and when you come up, just hang out. We'll take a picture with the council.
We were going to add another 0 this year for you.
Oh, that's why it felt so rich this year.
Adding zeros to a contract usually at the end makes good sense, and everybody's happy about that, but I'm not sure your zeros make much difference. Dr. Jacoby, Chair, and Chad Truxwell, Vice Chair of the Science, Technology, and Engineering and Modeling Advisory Committee.
Do we pay you for the jokes? I'm just
And Frank Catino, Chair, who is not here, and Jim Moore, Vice Chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee. Do you want to do that picture now, or you want to do it?
We'll get everybody up.
Okay. Okay, let me go on then. During our reorganization and 5-year EPA performance evaluation, the IRL Council received tremendous support from 3 individuals and partners within the National Estuary Program. These individuals are not with us today, but the staff will make sure that the awards are delivered. To Jennifer DeMeo, Region 4 EPA, and Vince Backlund from the EPA headquarters. And I believe Jennifer is listening online today?
I believe she is. And so, Jennifer, we really appreciate all the support. Extend our thanks up through the region and headquarters in D.C. We'll see you all for the spring meeting in D.C., but we really appreciate all you've done.
And I would like to add that she is an essential partner, and she's been with us since day one. And she often is not here in person, but she spends a lot of time with this group, and she's always online listening to us. So I think she's been very critical to our success. And from our NEP partners, Holly Greening, Director, Tampa Bay Estuary Program, she's announced her retirement effective January 1st. Her leadership has made the Tampa Bay Estuary Program one of the most effective and successful in the nation. Holly advised the IRL Council throughout our program reorganization and served on our EPA program evaluation team. She's been a trusted council member for our executive director, so we want to thank her and wish her well as she begins the next exciting phase of her life.
And Mr. Chair, I will be attending her retirement party the first of the year. They have announced, I hope I'm not jumping the gun, but I think it's public. They have announced the new executive director, Ed Sherwood, who is a senior scientist, a remarkable asset. He's been there, so we'll be working directly with Ed. And Holly's not going away. She's actually volunteering her time to the National Estuary Program as needed, almost as a ex officio director, and so she is out there for us if we need her, but she has been a remarkable asset for us.
And to finish up, the Indian River Lagoon Council and the IRL NEP would also like to recognize and thank our founding members of the Indian River Lagoon Innovator and Investor Network. Up the Creek Farms, Jessica Watson, who's the owner, who's provided a wonderful meeting location for our, we'd missed her, okay, for our committee meetings. Canaveral Port Authority, Bob Musser. For your generous financial and leadership support. Thank you, sir. Harris Corporation, Tom Campbell, for Harris's support of the reverse technology pitch and creation of the oyster bagging machine. I got to tell you, the oyster bagging machines just blows my mind that just popped out of somebody's brain.
Sure. It's our pleasure. On behalf of Harris Corporation and the 6,000 local employees, thank you for the opportunity to serve and simply to do our part. I'd like to thank Dwayne and the IRLI Squared for the creativity he's brought to the organization to allow us ways to participate. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Tom, we'll have to think something up new for next year.
The Indian River Lagoon is incredibly important to the business, and then also it's attracting our training to world-class talent that we want to grow. Thank you.
Dixie Crossroads Seafood Restaurant. We thank Lori Lee Thompson for her support of our Northern IRL field trips, connection to Florida tourism, and most importantly, her amazing rock shrimp.
Oh, yes.
Hey, Laura Lee, before we go on, you want to go to the mic and do a pitch for the birding event? I didn't think you'd say no.
Thank you for the opportunity for the commercial. So our 21st annual Space Coast Birding and Wildlife Festival will be January 24th through the 29th, and we have people from all over the world coming, both as exhibitors, as field trip leaders and speakers, and as participants. So we appreciate. Oh, and we're having a field trip, a special field trip with Dwayne and myself and Melinda Donnelly and Linda Walters. So we have a few seats left if anybody wants to go on a tour of Mosquito Lagoon and look at the oyster restoration and the shoreline stabilization that's taking place in Mosquito Lagoon. We got a couple of seats left. So, and on behalf of my partner and my staff and my mother who came from Dixie Crossroads, we really appreciate this. We need the lagoon to get fixed because I need shrimp.
Every time Laura Lee appears before the Brevard County Commission, I'm just amazed at how smiley she is. She's the smilingest person I've ever met. So therefore, she must be the happiest person I've ever met.
And Mr. Chair, I get asked everywhere I go, you know, what's the high bar for success? And a lot of my perspective has been through Laura Lee's eyes, that when we have a vibrant, sustainable commercial fishery, you know, where we're eating oysters from the lagoon, eating, you know, crabs and shrimp and, you know, and all of the things that the lagoon delivers to the table, then we know we hit the high bar because we're able to, you know, take and still have a sustainable fishery. And so we're on the last legs of commercial fishing in much of the lagoon. And Laura Lee keeps me connected with those last few commercial fishers in the system. And if we lose that, we lose a little bit of our tradition and history. And so I just want to make sure we continue that connection, Laura Lee. with that commercial fishery, because that's the high bar, is that we safely can eat what we catch from this system.
Amen.
Mr. Chair, just one comment, Laura Lee. I'll make a reservation on that tour. Dwayne, I'll connect with you. I've been wanting to do that, and what a better way to do it with you. So, Dwayne, I'll connect with you and
It'll be a lot of fun.
I'm counting on it. Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Zazowski?
Mr. Chairman, I did forget one part of my report. Last month, and it's one of the items that this body supported, and that was the Wesley Island renovation, the ecosystem. Mike Middlebrick is here from Environmental Resources in St. Lucie County, and he was instrumental in achieving a $2.5 million grant to connect the greenways and trails in St. Lucie County. And he was acknowledged last month by the East Coast Greenway for his efforts and what we're trying to accomplish through our lagoon projects. And we had them, they actually did a bicycle ride all the way from Maine, all the way down to Key West. And as part of that process, we were able to show off our water quality projects and why it's important to the greenways and trails, and how our efforts are continuing to support our ecosystem. So Mike Middlebrook is here. He's a humble fellow, and I just want to embarrass him a little bit. But it's important to understand that in that recognition was also the Wesley's Island project that this group supported. So just wanted to point that out.
And one other person I'd like to recognize here that's not getting any kind of award, but she deserves a lot of awards. Linda Weatherman.
Actually, she is getting an award.
Oh, she is getting an award. Okay, well, that's even better. Well, let me just
saved the best for last.
Let me just pat you on the back, and then we'll give you an award. This lady's a real fireball. I enjoy working with her in her capacity as the EDC chairman for Brevard County, and she's just got, whenever I stuck for ideas or I need some encouragement, she's the person.
And I want to interject here the support we've gotten from Economic Development Council and Linda. In fact, Linda gave a presentation at the Congressional House Caucus meeting 2 meetings ago that is still being talked about within EPA and within the Congressional Caucus about the connection between clean water, economic development, and industry. Every time I'm in Washington, you provide access to your team up there. Anytime there's a bill moving, I'm getting phone calls from the EDC's contractors. And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate having feet on the ground thanks to you all and the support from the EDC. And it's a pleasure to work with you. And Linda and I are scheming about how this water technology industry cluster can and should be built through the 5-county region as we begin to solve our problems. How can we leverage this into job creation, new innovation, and kind of almost start building the beginning of kind of what we look like back in the beginning of space when we said, we're going to put humans into orbit. How do we do that? Well, when we solve our water problems with technological innovation, we can create jobs and we can create an industry sector through this lagoon that could be another base of development. And so we're talking a lot about how do you get there, what's the approach. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support and leadership. And we need to have everybody come up for the picture, but thank you, Linda. And you want to say a few words?
I'll be brief. Thank you on behalf of the Board of Directors of the EDC. I want to thank you for that. The scheming hasn't been recent. We've been scheming for a long time, talking about places like the Water Council. I think as we're all Floridians in this room, that the merger and convergence of economic development programs along with environmental programs are the only way to address these major challenges, because they are both related. So I thank you for your recognition. Every time I have a crazy idea, I do call Dwayne, and he sets me straight, and he helped me a great deal in that presentation. He's given me way too much credit. So thank you so much. I look forward to working with you more. Okay?
I want to I want to say one of the most critical accomplishments I have had, undoubtedly, since I've become an elected official, was putting these two together. I met Linda as a candidate And I was impressed with her, and then, of course, when I got elected, I got to work with her a lot more, and then when we hired Dwayne, I said, wow, these are two of a kind. I need to get these two together. So I arranged that meeting, and boy, they've been like fireballs ever since. So thanks to both you guys.
And I would like to see that same kind of connection with all of the EDCs, the TDCs in the counties. I'm reaching out, and you know, as you do this as opportunity arises, but you know, each of you on council can kind of help move those relationships along. Each of the counties is very different economically, and they have different issues, different priorities, but I would like to have that same kind of relationship lagoon-wide. And then before you adjourn, do you want to adjourn and then do pictures?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
I just want to, I'll adjourn the meeting, wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season, and thank you all for being here, and we'll do our pictures now. Meeting adjourned.